Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years.
So a couple of weeks ago, I was out playing tennis and I was coming home and I get a call from Amber, my wife. And she goes, "Hey, can you use that cell phone tracker thing to see where Elliot is?" And I was like, yeah, like what's going on? And she goes, and you got to remember the time period here is like we were still in, Corona restrictions, right? Which meant we weren't supposed to be going to see friends. We weren't supposed to be going to the store.
Right.
We weren't supposed to be hanging out at the park. All the things that kids want to do. And so she goes, well, Elliot wanted to go biking. And I told him that he had to stay in the neighborhood and that he couldn't go hang out with friends. And I was like, okay, so why do I need to track him? And she goes, well, I just had a feeling that that's not what he was going to do. And that's not what he's doing now. I have a feeling that he's not in the neighborhood right now. And I was like, all right. And Amber is a redhead, which means stereotypical. She absolutely can read your mind all the time.
She's got superpowers.
Yes.
Cool.
So I was like, okay. So I pulled up the phone tracker and lo and behold, Elliot is 4 miles away from our house.
Oh my God.
Right at his friend's house. And unfortunately for him, I happened to be driving past his friend's house. I was like 2 blocks away. So like the dad I am, I just casually drove past and waved to him and said, "Hey, Elliot, you might want to bike home."
Is that what you did? Yes. Oh my gosh, that's genius, because he spent the next 4 miles going, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble.
God, why do you have to be coming to my friend's house? Like, dude,
The question is, why are you going to your friend's house after we just told you not to?
Yeah, right. Why am I playing tennis with my friends in the park? But I thought, that was really interesting. Like Amber calls me and says like, "Hey, it doesn't feel right to me. I sense that there's something off here." Right. And that's just her gut. That's her intuition.
Yeah.
She's got a very strong sense like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And some people call it like a sixth sense.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you and I were just talking about the 5 senses, and maybe the sixth one.
Right. I think this is like something I've been sort of pondering on for months, actually. I had this theory that there are the 5 senses that we all talk about, and little kids are taught how to be human beings by having an awareness of those 5 senses. So sight, taste, smell, touch, and hear. Mm. And from the time you are a baby, you're taught about those senses all the time. Oh, don't touch that. You could get burned. Ooh, don't listen to music too loud because you could hurt your hearing. Mm. Don't eat that pizza because you'll burn your mouth and you won't be able to taste. So we're constantly validated through the growth of those 5 senses. Yet we all also have a 6th sense, if you will, which is our gut reactions, our feelings to things. And I believe that is the strongest sense of them all. Mm. And so I started several months ago making a conscious awareness to think about that. Like, is that true that we don't really cultivate that? We don't really teach our kids to trust our instincts, trust our gut. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of examples, I think, as an adult, in which we are encouraged not to. And
like, in what way? We always, as adults, we like to think like, we're using our head, our logic a lot. We're thinking through problems. We're very, knowledge, fact, logic based, right?
Yeah. And like in the workplace, if you're with a team of people working to solve something and you have a gut feeling about something, you really have to massage how you're going to say it. I feel people have to be, or are used to being, very concerned about sharing their true feeling about something, their gut about something, because they think they're going to be judged, or they're not going to look like the rest of the team that's using data or logic or, thinking things through.
Yeah, I've been in meetings like that where I would say, this doesn't feel right. And then the response is, okay, why? Like, break it down. Tell me the logic that leads you to that. And like, there's no logic to it. It just doesn't feel right. I don't know.
Right.
But then everyone will dismiss that point. Like, okay, I don't know. JJ doesn't like it. Who knows? Like, let's move on with our analysis.
Right. Exactly. That's my point. So like, that's a perfect example of how we have a feeling about something, and 99.9% of the time it's actually right. But we're not used to talking about that sense like we would be our eyesight. Oh my gosh, did you see that? Look at that. Look at that over there. I can see it, so I believe it. It's real. And with this, you can't see it and you can't be logical about it, because it's operating from a different part of who you are. It isn't operating from your brain. It's operating from somewhere in your core, which I think is why so many people say, my gut doesn't feel right, or I'm anxious and I have a stomach ache. Like we talk about, I have this feeling that something isn't right. I can't explain what that feeling is. But you do hear, like your example with Amber, as a mom, there are certain places in society where it is more okay to have those gut reactions. And a mom would be that, because the mom's love is one of the strongest loves that anyone will ever feel, traditionally or typically, as we societally think about it. And I sort of had this feeling about this. Like I just started sensing more and more that this is a thing. There's some story here that I was trying to tell. And so just for curiosity's sake, last night I went on Google, because you and I talked last night and decided, let's talk about the six senses for our podcast today. Yeah. And I Googled the sixth sense, and it wasn't until the second page where I even found headlines that said intuition. And then the headlines, though, were all attached to really far out concepts, like the psychic abilities, or like you must be deeply meditating if you want to understand your own feelings or your own gut reactions to things. Yeah. And then I ran across something that's when I started to kind of smile and laugh, actually, is I found a WikiHow page, which I'm not much on Wikipedia, but it must be a thing where there's WikiHows now. I didn't know that. And the title.
Those are those like cheesy things that show you how to build a birdhouse in 6 steps.
Oh, got it. That makes sense. And so I was looking at it, and even the images and stuff are sort of funny. They look almost like those cartoonish kind of images, but it says how to develop your sixth sense. Part 1, tapping into your intuition. And I started to sort of think, oh my gosh, here it is. Like we take that natural piece of us and we make it something outside of us.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when you start talking about intuition, how quickly, like you said, it slides into some more far out concepts, which, in my opinion, aren't really that far out.
Right. I agree.
Like I don't really judge those things like that, because I really don't think they're that far out. But there's a popular culture and thinking around the idea that those concepts are, too unapproachable for most of society.
Right. Like the social norm does not allow for intuition or your guts or your feelings, or I just feel like, I don't know, something just isn't right.
I was doing my own hardened research as you were scouring the internet. And Amber and I were watching Family Feud the other night.
As you do, as we all do.
For research. And one of the questions really struck me. It was, we asked 100 people on a scale from 1 to 10, rate your psychic ability. Right? And my gut reaction to what I thought the number one answer was going to be was 8.
That's
I thought 8.
Interesting.
I thought the number one answer was going to be 8.
Yeah.
The number one answer was 0. And the number 2 answer was 1. And I was like, what is happening here? Like, really, people don't feel they've got an ability to like sense things, because I took that, maybe it was like, because I take that question different than 100 other people. But I mean, I took that question as like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust your gut, or do you get a gut feeling about things, or an intuition about things? That's how I took that question.
Right.
And I thought it was going to be really high, because I see people with great intuition.
Right.
Like I can observe it.
Right.
But people somehow don't feel like they have it, which I thought was really interesting.
I think that is fascinating. I think it's fascinating that it was 0. Which brings me to another question, which I don't have the answers to, but this brings me to another question, which is, if we all have feelings or gut reactions to things, and when something comes up for us, we don't think it's okay to have those feelings. We don't think, it's like, that intuition. Ooh, don't. We don't talk about that unless you can see it, taste it, smell it, hear it, or touch it. Don't rely on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If we watch the development of being a human, like if I'm developing myself and I am not feeling secure about my gut feelings, then I've seen this over and over again. Like, can we watch that unravel to a point where we say, I'm having this feeling. I don't trust myself. And not only do I trust myself, I don't feel like I'm even really allowed to have this intuition, or certainly not talk about it. So I'm going to just put this away. And then it could even be like in a bad job, for example. Like, let's say you're in a job that doesn't suit you, and you're great and the job is great. It's just not a love connection, right? It's just not a match. And your gut tells you, this is not working for me, but it's a great job and the company looks cool and everybody thinks that you should love it. But your intuition tells you it's not right. It's not right. It's not right. And pretty soon you start feeling like you aren't successful in the job. Pretty soon you feel like you aren't successful in your own, like you're not successful, like you're bad or you're broken. And I had an experience like that I wrote a blog on not too long ago. But isn't that interesting? So I'm just curious. The question is, can this single part that we're talking about right now be directly linked to how things get really, really, really big and then get overblown, either in social settings or like fights or things like that?
You're saying by not sort of recognizing this sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you were talking about when you were kind of defining that, what I was thinking was, if you said just the last 1 minute of what you said, but instead of saying intuition, you use the word see, like like
Mm,
if I
yeah.
if I see things that I'm unsure of, I ignore things I see. I, and switch that out with a different one of the senses. You would be explaining a crazy person, right?
Yeah. Yes,
So,
exactly. Right.
someone who would be ignoring what they see, or seeing things that aren't there, or like all of that, um, it would be really harmful to your mental state. So you're kind of saying, hey, we're doing that with our intuition, and it's harming our mental state.
Yes. Or certainly it's harming our own, like our deep core. Like it's not, and maybe that's a really strong way to say it. Maybe we could just say we sure are blocking our own development. Like it prevents us from being our authentic, true, genuine self,
Mm-hmm.
because we take one of the senses of us that is a highly developed sense, by the way. We just are not consciously aware, and we make ourselves wrong for it. So it's like, I don't like how this feels to have an intuition or a gut reaction to something. I don't like how I feel about that. And so I'm going to push that away. I'm going to replace it with going and doing something. I'm going to act like it doesn't exist. And the more and more that we do that, I think the more wobbly we become at our core.
Mm.
And that's when people start to get really sad, because then there's really nothing that's anchoring them anymore, because they've lost faith in their own guts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I can see how that would be really tough, right? I mean, and actually hard to see,
Yeah.
hard to
Yeah.
recognize in yourself.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, um, without getting way into psychic land, what is like the training wheels version of developing our
Mm.
intuition, listening to our intuition? Like, what do you think are some things we can do to practice this? Just like in kindergarten, we practice feeling something that was smooth and something that was rough, and understanding the
Oh,
difference.
yeah. That's
Right?
so good.
What's the kindergarten version? Because I think that's
Yeah.
probably where most of us need to start.
Yes, and you didn't even read this WikiHow article, because the very first thing it says is cultivate your intuition, and then the first bullet point says scientists believe intuition is a form of quick information processing, and it's a skill that can be developed and practiced with attention. So there you go. You're like, you should be writing WikiHow articles. I think there's a really simple way I have experienced in my coaching relationships. Almost every single one of them, if not every single one of them, begins with this conversation, just not as overt as you just asked. I think, though, that if we just get a feeling, sitting with it for a minute, and then asking ourselves, what is that? What is that feeling? What's behind that feeling? Rather than trying to shove it away or make it all a logical conversation in your mind, because feelings are not logical. And I think that, but feelings are always right. So I think the very first step is to just take a breath. And if you're somebody who likes to process information really fast, and I'm somebody I'm constantly focusing on how to slow down, because I just like to go fast. The very first thing is slowing down. When you have that feeling, even saying something to yourself like, isn't that interesting?
Mm.
Because it just gives that little break at this tiny
Mm-hmm.
little space. It gives you just a tiny little bit of space to be with it for a second. And I really think that that's the first step. And it sounds so easy. It's not easy. It's not
No,
easy.
right. We had an episode a few back where we talked about like being with that feeling and sort of exploring a feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of my clients will have such strong intuition, strong gut reactions to things because they have never addressed things, or they've let them get to a point where they're in a lot of pain. And so every time a little feeling comes up for them, it actually mushrooms into something oversized because they've been trying to push it down or ignore it. And so then when they ignore a feeling, it doesn't actually go away, which is what we think it does. We think, oh, well, I made that go away. Like, I'm not thinking about it anymore. And I ate a hamburger. So now I don't have a stomach ache. So it's gone. It's just gone. But it's never gone. And so what happens is you're just kind of collecting stamps, right? You're just kind of collecting. And pretty soon when it's full, I always say that about the old stamp books, from the 70s. Every time you bought something, you got a stamp. And then when the book was full, you could cash it in and you could get free stuff. Well, in this case, every time you have these feelings and you try to push them away, you get another stamp in your book. And then eventually you hit the last stamp and you cash that book in for something, whether it be a temper tantrum or you get really upset about something. So that's what happens.
Cashing it in for like
a frying pan.
Candy or wrong. You're cashing it in for a temper tantrum.
But you know what? Like, we're laughing about it now because it does sound funny when you say it, but that's what we do. That's what we do. Instead of just being with something, we shove it to the side and we think, okay, I managed that. It's not there anymore, but it is.
I was visualizing it more like the prank where you've got like a can and you open it,
Yes.
that like spring snake comes out. It's just like, I just visualized it as like every time you're just pushing the spring snake a little lower, it's in the can and it's going to explode one day.
Oh my gosh. There's a million visual images that you could come up with for that. That would be very entertaining, actually. We'll have to maybe do that some other podcast. But I just think
for our comic strip, it's going to be
bloopers. We'll have a bloopers podcast. So I just think to me, really honestly, and it's a process. I think first of all is if we could just give ourselves a little break. I had a client that I had two things happen yesterday that are right in alignment with this, that I just thought, wow, that's so interesting how people are really developing themselves. And it takes a little while and a little focus. But I had a client that texted me and said, Melissa, you would be so proud of me. I was trying to make myself okay with this relationship with this individual that she had started, and it wasn't right for her. And she said, you would be so proud of me because I was trying to make it right. But I heard you and your voice saying, your feelings are never wrong. Your feelings are never wrong. And she said, and I immediately was able to calm down and go right to sleep. And she was so pleased. And here she felt the need to say that I would be proud of her. But it wasn't me that was proud in that moment. It was her. Yeah. It was her, because she started to recognize, oh, this instinct, this feeling coming up for me is not something that I have to pretend doesn't exist. So I really think that's the first
illustration of the opposite of what you're talking about earlier, about how when you don't lean into that intuition and you suppress it, how that kind of spirals downward. Yeah. In this instance, she did lean into it, trusted it, and it lifted her, right? Yeah, that's great.
So it's just an interesting conversation today, and I think that this is where everything starts. Actually, is just recognizing that gut reaction that we have about things, and boy, the more we spend a little time with it, the more it becomes a stronger ally and partnership with ourselves. And then the easier things become to discern what's right and wrong for you, for me, for you, and so I think that's really the first part, is to just hear it and say, be with it for just a minute. Isn't that interesting? Like, I have this feeling. What is this feeling about? Instead of, oh, I don't like this feeling. Just get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a really interesting conversation. I think we probably have a future episode to riff on this topic more, even a little deeper, because, we were kind of joking about it, but
Yeah.
as you kind of push this idea of intuition, it really, to me, it really becomes interesting. Like if you just kind of open your mind to how far you could take that. So we
Yeah.
won't get into it today, but maybe in the future we can
Yeah.
kind of explore a little deeper, because I'd say whether, people maybe believe it or not, it's certainly a really interesting topic to explore. Right. And I think
Definitely.
that if people are open to it, they might really find some truths hidden
I
in that
agree.
topic, even though it's a little bit,
Soft and fluffy.
a little bit soft and fluffy. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Good conversation. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.